by my attitude that I most definitely from. By my
All right, welcome everybody. It's the Fantasy Empire. We are ready for you this week, and we're gonna start off by talking about Thanksgiving. Just curious, you guys, how Thanksgiving was at your households or wherever you went, and any favorite events, memories, anything like that. Matt, start us off.
It sucked. How about that? I'll start us off on a note.
Matt, you're supposed to be the positive one, Adam. Me and Nelson are the negative ones. You're supposed to be the positive one. You came in talking turkey sucked and stuffing was terrible.
The turkey.
We're off to a rough start.
Last couple of years I've been getting from this place. It's been an awesome dinner, and they kind of changed it up this year. The turkey was Black Friday was just a black hole, My boy Worthy couldn't make that catch. That cost me a lot of money, so I was pretty pissed at that. And then last night, just to sum up the weekend, is I was praying to the Lord that Jameis wouldn't throw any more pick sixes. I was up like 8.3, and he throws a pick six, and then he throws the pick in the end zone, and I lose by 0.7. It's just unbelievable.
You know what's crazy? You know what's crazy about Winston's pick six, and Jameis was on full display last night, man. That's the Winston experience right there. 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 pick sixes, which should have been 3 if it wasn't for Jerry Jeudy's hustle at the end of the game. And I'm like, Jeudy, just let him go. Broncos D would have had 3 pick sixes in one game at the end there. If he didn't track the defender down.
There you go, Chris. All right, keep going, Chris. What's your Thanksgiving observation from your own personal Thanksgiving?
Wow. It was a solid day. The Bears offense was stuck in reverse most of the day, and then they put on a second half display. Rico Dowdle came up big on Thanksgiving Day. He performed the way I was hoping he would. And then the late game was, the Dolphins offense reminded me of the Bears offense on Thanksgiving Day, where they did nothing the first half. You thought everyone was going to bomb out. And then, the second half, Tua puts up big numbers again, goes over 30 fantasy points. Jonnu, again, is a top 3 tight end. And the Dolphins fantasy players are saved in a game where they look like they were going to get completely wiped out. So fantasy-wise, it was a pretty good Thanksgiving Day. Food-wise, I have to agree with Maddie. We were subpar in the Vaccaro household. We didn't perform. We didn't live up to our expectations.
There we go. Oh, Nelson, what do you got?
Yeah, we spent time at my sister's house. It's always good, hanging out with the family and everything. It was solid, afternoon watching the games, and Friday was excellent too. My guy Brock Bowers got it done. Yeah. Got him on quite a few teams, but then Sunday came, and then last night's game, and I don't. Again, it goes right back to like, okay, we're starting off good. A little 30-point game from Bowers, and this could be a really monster week. And it's just like bad. You look at the start sit calls. I got Jerry Jeudy on a handful of teams that are in contention. I didn't start him. I sat him. So, I don't know, man.
I was just going to ask you guys.
Real quick. Like he said about Jeudy, I was shocked. I know Surtain doesn't really follow every game, but that was the one weapon they had. And I assumed they were just going to shut him, lock him up on him for every play. I thought that was wild.
But Matt, here's the thing. Judy comes out first play of the game. It looks like a broken play, catches one over the middle for 44 yards, and then Surtain locks him up for the next quarter and a half. Judy does nothing until late in the second quarter. He catches 2 balls for like 10 yards each in Surtain's coverage. Okay, and then after that, the only time he was getting the ball is when Judy would come in motion and Surtain wouldn't follow him. And then as soon as that happened, whenever it would happen, like 1 out of every 5, 6, 7 plays, Winston would throw it to him. So Surtain, I think under Surtain's coverage, it was like 3 catches for 25 yards. And then all his damage was when he got away from Surtain. So I hear what you're saying. Surtain should have just followed him all around the field and wiped him out of the game. But when Surtain didn't cover him, Winston was finding him.
Yep, there you go. And so
did we all sit him?
I got to tell you, the turkey was fantastic. It was the best ever this year. Absolutely nailed it.
I'm jealous.
So it was so good. I mean, the breast meat was so tender. It was just like you barely even had to chew. It was so tender. It was absolutely.
Way to rub it in, Dan.
I will. I will.
What are you going to do? Tell us you started Jerry Judy too?
But I will say one thing about the bad Thanksgiving dinner. I will make it up on Christmas Eve with the the crab sauce and the Alaskan king crab legs.
We always expect the Christmas dinner feast specials tweeted out from the Modica household. So
I'll have to take a picture this year. I do a New York strip roast.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Yep.
Very nice. Very nice. All right, gentlemen.
All right. So Chris,
let's talk some
ball. Get us going here, man.
All right.
All right. Well, I'm going to take my cue from my friend Nelson from last week about, I don't think anybody cares about our observations too much at this point in the season. We know what we know. We see what we see here on a weekly basis. My couple observations, though, really talking about setting up your playoff teams now that we're going into week 14 here, and the issues I'm finding trying to set up my team to be successful in week 14 with also trying to have one eye on that team making the playoffs in week 14 with a win or good points and sending it to the playoffs. And, it's actually a tricky little, a slippery slope we're on here, because you got to replace your kickers. You're playing your mix and match with trying to take defenses into the playoffs, but you need to put out your best team and make the pickups for week 14 here. So I kind of want to throw it at you guys and ask you how you guys are playing that heading into week 14 on teams that are like in 4th place and have a chance to get in, as opposed to how you're setting it up for the playoffs, if that makes any sense to you guys.
I mean, for me, it's easy. If you're trying to get into the playoffs, that's the goal. I'm not looking past that. And whatever I have on my team, I'll hopefully I have enough, depth for the playoffs. But you got to get in. That's the way I look at it.
Are you backing up your quarterback? Like, are you bringing that extra third quarterback, that second defense?
See, the problem for me is I have a lot of teams with 3 quarterbacks. Unfortunately, I have Drake May on basically every team, but he's on a bye. And then like the Jaden Daniels, or if you have like an A-Rich, or I'm trying to think who else is on a bye out of these 6 teams.
Everybody. 6 starting quarterbacks,
like
that
Lamar,
we use are on a bye.
I'm in a situation in a couple of these FFPC Fantasy Pros championships where I got Will Levis starting. I got Kirk Cousins. I don't have a choice. My other 2 quarterbacks are on buys. And, Kirk Cousins has just been like probably the worst quarterback, Even
he hasn't thrown a touchdown. Kirk Cousins hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in his last 3 starts. Imagine in that offense not being able to have 1 touchdown for 3 consecutive games is absolutely amazing. And just, Dan, real quick, I know you want to jump in here. Matt, that's kind of my point of the question here is with the 6 teams on bye and you trying to fill out your starting lineup basically, and avoid all these disasters of losing so many of your players, how are you just, trying to do the best you can to fill out your team for week 14 without an eye onto the playoffs? You don't want to set your team up where it's like, oh God, I don't have this covered for the playoffs if I don't make it here in week 14. It's really complicated with the 6 teams on bye in week 14, trying to get in and then trying to set your team up for a 3-week sprint where there are no pickups at the same time. So I guess that's really what I'm trying to ask for this.
Yeah, I think you've just, like Matt said, you've got to just set your teams up. Nelson is always saying, and I agree with him. He's refusing to prognosticate too far into the future. It's like all season long, Nelson's just been saying, I'm worried about next week. I'm not worried about rest of season. And I think even into the playoffs, it's still kind of that way, especially if you're not already, guaranteed to be in. You just got to do whatever you got to do. And, hopefully it works out in the end. Sometimes the most unlikely players, you pick up a guy for week 14 and he ends up not only helping you week 14, but 15, 16, and 17 too. So you never know.
Nelson, anything on that?
Yeah, no, I think for the high stakes leagues that we're in, where this is basically the final week of fab bidding to be able to improve our rosters, make pickups, I think it's a different mindset versus some listeners that are in, let's say, a local league or something like that, where they have pickups right straight through the playoffs. You can definitely plan it differently, but for the guys that are in high stakes leagues like ours, you basically have to plan ahead, for the future. And that's for quarterback. My theory on it is, if I have Jalen Hurts, I'm picking up Kenny Pickett. If I've got Josh Allen, I'm picking up Trubisky. If I've got Jaden Daniels, I'm picking up Mariota. And it's only specific quarterbacks. So like most likely you were naked with those quarterbacks, meaning you were just starting them every week and you don't really have like a legit second option. So instead of going and picking up like a Derek Carr or a Cooper Rush, someone like that, I think that you go ahead and just get the backup. That I think those particular quarterbacks, Jake Browning from the Bengals backing up Burrow, those particular quarterbacks, if, hopefully nothing happens to these starters and they stay healthy, but if something happened and they missed time, I think those quarterbacks would be very serviceable and that you could put in the lineup and you're at least not getting a 0 out of it because they're all tied to elite offenses or high scoring offenses.
All right, let me ask this question real quick. Based on this topic, the Houston Texans kicker has been phenomenal this year, Kaimi Fairbairn, week 14. And Justin Tucker's been a mess, okay? But he's still attached to a good offense. So if you want to include him in this conversation, we can. What are you guys doing with your week 14 Houston Texans kicker? Just say, are you carrying him in or you're dropping him and just picking up one kicker to take into the playoffs? Whereas the question is basically, if you're a Texans and Ravens owner kicker, are you going to carry 2 in, the guy you pick up for week 14 and still keep Fairbairn on your bench, eating up a roster spot in a week like this for week 14?
I can answer that because I have Fairbairn in a couple of places, and I already added, what's his name, Ryland from the Cardinals just for this week. And
then you're carrying 2 kickers.
I'm going to have to because, I think Fairbairn, he's just too good for the most part. He has, over 12 kicks and 50 yards this year?
Sure. Yeah.
You hear these idiots. I just got to point this out. You hear these idiots on Twitter saying ban kickers and all this crap,
it's dumb.
Yeah. Shout out to Chris for getting the kicker conversation started right away.
Dan, I had to sneak that in. Don't worry. Later on, I'll bring up the defensive conversation. But hey, these things are all important as you head into. To me, these things are the unsung, things that people don't talk about in high stakes fantasy that are very important as we head into this week 14. And then you want to map out your playoffs with these defenses. I'm carrying 3 defenses. It sounds crazy. I don't usually do it. But this year, I want to be in the right matchups in my teams that I know are already going into the playoffs. Dan, what do you got?
Yeah, I think it's important, to carry two kickers if you're in the FFPC and you've got to carry an actual name rather than a team. But even in the NFFC, I'm a lot of times carrying two kickers if there's nobody compelling either on the back end of my roster or on the waiver wire. I'm not going to sit there and pick up, I don't know, just some random wide receiver who might or might not fall into value. I don't care about that at this point. I would rather have that second kicker, especially if I can arrange the matchups where I feel like, okay, week 15 and 17, the first kicker has a good matchup, and then week 16, my other kicker would have a good matchup. I think I can get more points out of playing those matchups like that than I can get out of, just carrying some random player.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Except in the NFFC, if I have like a Cameron Dicker or a Boswell, I'm just rolling with them. I'm just.
What about weather for Boswell, though?
It's two different. Yeah, so that's the thing. It's that you got FFPC and NFFC. NFFC, it's team kicker. Okay, so you really don't have to stress over it. Your kicker goes out with a hamstring pregame, no sweat, as long as they have somebody that can, kick extra points and field goals. But as far as carrying the second kicker, I do agree that in FFPC, you have weird shit happen. I mean, look at Koo from like Atlanta. He's dealing with like a hamstring or leg, hip issue or whatever. And he's missing kicks and stuff like that. So you can't feel good about it. Just carrying one kicker. So I would definitely carry two. It just depends the format. And
Koo has been terrible.
He's been terrible. Yeah.
He's been terrible. Justin Tucker's been terrible. There's a handful of kickers in the league right now that are really bad, and there's a handful of kickers that are unbelievably great. And the difference on a weekly basis, if you have the handful of great guys compared to the bad ones, is 15, 20-point differences some weeks. Yeah. Okay. And I'm also seeing that defensive wise. Look at the Broncos defense last night, 21 fantasy points in NFFC, the Chargers 19. There were a couple others that were 17 and 19 this past week. And I had them on my bench. I thought the Chargers defense was in a really bad spot. Not a bad spot, but I wanted to get away from them, and I tried to get a little cute. The Dallas defense gave 19 fantasy points on Thanksgiving. I really think that this is the year where you want to just set up your defenses here, get 2 or 3 of them on your roster if you're going to the playoffs, and pick on the bad teams and the bad offenses. Because in an overall shootout for 3 weeks, if you get a 15, a 13, and an 18 from your fantasy defense those 3 weeks by picking the right options here, that could be the difference of $250,000. And a lot of people just say, I got my one defense, I'll just take it in. And then in week 16, they're in a bad matchup. They give 2 points. That's a huge swing. So listen, I know I get some heat on talking about the fantasy kickers and defenses, but it's a major thing. A lot of people this past week got the combination of the Tampa Bay kicker and the Dallas and Denver defense, a 21 and a 14. Things like that. It's 35 points from your kicker and defense. So,
just real quick, being that we're talking defenses, like I kept seeing like a couple of weeks ago, I hate when people say this, but it's become the in vogue thing. Tampa Bay defense is going to feed families and shit like that. Their rest of season schedule isn't that easy. I mean, if Aiden O'Connell looked all right, and he was getting the ball to Bowers, which was beautiful, and Jacoby. Then they got the Chargers, the Cowboys offense, can probably score on them. I don't think Tampa's defense. And Carolina looks a lot better than, shout out to Bryce Young. He's looking like an NFL quarterback, which is good to see.
Yeah. All right, we'll get off that topic. I just wanted to see how they were playing out their week 14 and everything like that. My next topic, if you saved all your money and you have the hammer in this last week of Fab over here, if you were one of those guys that sat back and prayed that you got one shot to add a significant player off the waiver wire, which we haven't seen in a while, It's going to work out real nicely for you with this whole San Francisco backfield debacle and Garendo sitting there on, I think it's 55%, almost 50% of high stakes leagues, NFFC at least, going into this final week. You're going to be able to go in there, drop the hammer on Garendo, get a piece that could probably be a nice RB2 flex play for your starting lineup, especially if you're in that position that you have the hammer and you're taking that team into the fantasy playoffs. It was absolutely heartbreaking for someone like myself who has all the Jordan Mason shares, and on half of my playoff teams, Mason was sitting on my bench. I was excited for about a half of a day yesterday after the McCaffrey news broke late Sunday night that I would get Mason on these playoff teams, and then we all lost him. So it's the Garendo takeover for these final 4 weeks of the fantasy season here.
Was that not the ultimate, Ron Burgundy meme when he's in the phone booth? I'm in a glass of emotions. Because
yes.
like in the fantasy pros and FFPC, I have a ton of Mason, and you feel strong for that moment, for a couple of hours, like you were saying. But I also have a lot of Garendo, so now it's like, okay. But yeah, it's wild. If you have the hammer and you didn't spend, I mean, I find it odd. Like there was in a FFPC main event this past weekend, me and my partner Jason Anthony, we were the 4th seed, and we were playing. We were playing the team. They had $931 left. Yeah. I was like, how? How is that possible? I mean, thank God we beat them, but I mean,
I think it's because a lot of people threw in the towel weeks ago. If they had a bad team and they had a lot of money left, they just walked away from their team. And I see in a lot of my leagues, guys with 800,
but Matt's talking about a first place team.
Yeah,
first place team. Oh,
this team was in first.
That's
they had
wild.
$931. I mean, it was all tight. The top 4, we were all tight there.
Yeah,
but like throughout the season, there was nobody on your roster. I don't know.
That's wild.
Yeah, I got a couple
wild.
teams that had like 600 or so left going into last week, and it was just because the team was good enough from top to bottom. I didn't feel like I needed to make a lot of replacements, so it was I wasn't gonna just
No, but you said you had like
600 just to shuffle
You spent like 300 or something. Like
yeah,
you spent $60
definitely.
over 12, 13 weeks. I don't know. It just seems wild to me.
Nelson, I noticed on a lot of your rosters last night as I'm going through my leagues trying to see where Garendo was available, and most of my leagues with you, he wasn't available because you still have him rostered. I'm surprised that you still held on to him, because I know myself, I had all the Jordan Mason shares, and on all those teams, I had Garendo rostered. And when McCaffrey came back in like the second week, I said, there's no point in me rostering Garendo. He's the 3rd string. He's never going to sniff the field. And I dropped Garendo, and now I lost out on my Mason shares that he's done, as well as Garendo sending him to the wire. So I got double kicked in the ass. But you held on, apparently. I don't know if that's going to help you if you need him in spots, but that's a big name to go back on your bench and look and see right now if you're going into the playoffs with those teams.
Well, I wouldn't even pat myself on the back having Garendo on teams, because I had 80% Garendo. So it's nowhere close to that. So I definitely have dropped them quite a bit. And the reason why I still have them was because I was a big Garendo fan, hence 80% on rosters. So I always felt that you had the Mason, he was dealing with the shoulder injury and everything. And I just obviously, you know that, Chris, we both faded McCaffrey. Yeah, I wasn't a big believer in McCaffrey all year. Even with him coming back, I felt like it left him open for a compensation type injury with him missing so much time. And then they ramped him up to like basically full snaps, like from day one.
Yeah.
So with Garendo, I still kept him on some rosters, but I dropped him my fair share. But it just came down to like the running back that I was trying to pick up, or if I wanted to pick up like a second defense or something like that, I just didn't feel comfortable. I kept playing it in my head. The exact scenario that played out yesterday and Sunday, I played in my head of like, what if McCaffrey goes down and then like the perfect storm happens and Mason goes down, and I've got this fucker on 80% of teams, and I just wholesale drop him on every single team. I cannot travel over a bridge for a few weeks. So I was like,
I feel the same way.
So I was like, you know what? I'm still gonna keep him, but if like Vidal came along, you know what? I'm gonna pick up Vidal instead of Garendo because maybe he's one Edwards injury away, where Garendo was 2 injuries away. Okay, so that's why he stayed on a few teams where I wasn't ready to just wholesale drop him.
Yeah, I will say this to wrap up the Niner backfield conversation here. He's obviously max out, throw all your money at Garendo here on the last week of the wire. You're not going to get anything remotely close to a Garendo right now going into the playoffs. But this Niner team is a complete dumpster fire. It's throwing in the towel. They McCaffrey's gone, Mason's gone. I don't know if anybody saw this late last night, but they came out with some news that Trent Williams, who missed this past week, he had a terrible tragedy in his family, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's gone the rest of it. It's not an injury anymore, to worry about with Trent Williams to get back. I think it's a family issue now where I think you won't see him the rest of the year. And if that's the case, that offensive line suffers a major blow, and I don't know what Garendo's going to offer, but at the same time, he's still a max bid. Throw all your money at him and try and get another piece.
Yeah, real quick. I mean, I think the question is like, what are we viewing Garendo this week as? Like, is he just a flex play? Who would you play him over? That's going to be the difficult question, Jack.
Matt, he's going to.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
I'm a huge Garendo guy. Okay, in terms of talent. Even though the 49ers are a dumpster fire, to me, he has I'm not saying I'm not going to try to super hype him up, but he's got top 10 potential the rest of the year. Like he could be that good with a sizable workload. Now, Patrick Taylor, they're probably going to involve him. Okay. So it's not just going to be Garendo, even on passing downs. I don't think this is a Chase Brown scenario, but he's that good. Like he's got elite athleticism and speed that, I mean, you saw it, on that touchdown run. Okay. On Sunday. So I do think that like you're firing on Garendo and spending whatever you have left because he could be a true difference maker.
Big time. And you know what? Every year, we see this out of the running back position late in the season where one of these guys comes out of nowhere, third, fourth stringer, and injuries clear a path for him. And and that particular player winds up helping teams win an overall title or be in the runnings. Garendo's that name, guys, that, talent-wise, he really could chip in 15, 20 points as a flex spot or an RB2 if your team was in need of those positions. And that's why we're saying it's an easy empty the clip on him and take him into the playoffs as a startable piece.
Totally agree. All right, guys, we're going to pay the bills real quick. We'll be right back.
Hey, I know DFS may have peaked, but there are still hundreds of thousands of people to play and millions of dollars up for grabs every week. So let's put our hoodie on and let's talk about Player Profiler's DFS Dominator. It has a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Billy and Theo and Bradley and Evan and that Player Profiler AI engine to create cash game lineups that certainly have a high floor, but also give you that ceiling. Now, you've probably heard about the most powerful tool of all, our Lineup Genius. We know winning GPPs requires a completely different approach, which is why our Lineup Genius takes you through the process of selecting the quarterbacks in the juiciest matchups. Then it highlights the stacks and runbacks that are available, lets you pick the chalk level, lets you pick the level of correlation with a number of other proprietary settings available to you. Click a button and it generates hundreds of lineups to be imported into FanDuel and DraftKings. And it's just $45 a year, not a week, a year. So for that reason alone, if you play DFS, you'd be an idiot not to buy the DFS Dominator.
All right, and we're back. Chris, what do you got for us next?
Yeah, two quick things. This Lad McConkey season here down the stretch is reminding me of the Hunter Renfrow one from the Raiders a couple years back when you got to the fantasy playoffs, those last 4 or 5 weeks, and he was just pumping out 25-point games, 20-plus point games, and he was basically a top 10 ranked wide receiver every week. And I know he's dealing with some knee issues now, and he's a little banged up. But if he gets himself on the field, Lad McConkey, to me, is a wide receiver 1 going forward rest of the season here. And for the way you got him on the draft board this year, absolute steal. So just wanted to bring that up with Lad McConkey. If you have him rostered, he's a solid floor of 15 fantasy points every week in this Charger offense.
That was my rookie
Jacoby
pick
Myers
last
right
month.
in there too.
Say that again?
Said throw Jacoby Myers right in there too. Same kind of deal. I mean, not as talented maybe, but it's Brock Bowers and him. That's it.
Yeah. Matt, what'd you say?
No, last month when we were talking about rest of the season, that was my guy that I picked on the show. So,
yeah.
I mean, I got to say, he's really impressive. I mean, the only downside with him is he's a little small, so he gets a little banged up, but he's a beast.
Yeah, listen, he's going to continue to get banged up, like you said, because of his size and everything, and maybe his shelf life in the NFL won't be, that long like Renfro's. But while we have him, he's going to make people a lot of money here down the stretch if he can stay on the field. That's it. That was real quick. What are we all doing with Breece Hall, guys, going forward? Where's our confidence level on him? I feel like he's putting to the finish line. They might shut him down. I could see a lot more Braylon Allen down the stretch here. If you're a Breece Hall owner, I think you have to be concerned about them pulling the plug at a halftime. This past week, I'm watching the game. He's limping at the 2-minute warning. I was like, I can't believe it. He's not going to come out of the locker room for the halftime here. He gutted it out, but he didn't add too much in the box score. The whole Breece Hall versus Bijan at the top of the board, 50-50. That was my dilemma. Loving the two of them. It really tilted big time here down the stretch. You would much rather have Bijan than Breece Hall. This season, the last month of the year here.
Yeah, Bijan continues to get it done, even though Cousins has looked terrible the last 3 weeks. But it hasn't affected Bijan. So as far as
checkdowns are there, Nelson.
Yeah, just everything's there. And he looks good. He looks explosive. Breece, on the other hand, not the case. The Jets were already a dumpster fire. I didn't like that vibe, that whole missed practice, last week, that kind of, put him on the radar where we're like, okay, what's going on here with Breece? And the coach said, over the bye week had a little tweak or whatever. I'm like, man, I'm not liking this vibe. And, sure enough, we saw a lot more Braylon Allen than we had in previous weeks. And I don't know. I don't think it's going to be something that's going to get, that's going to get healed overnight. So I think he's just going to play with it. He's at risk of getting shut down. Braylon Allen is the guy, like, he's not available anywhere. Like, he's 100% owned in every league. He should be, at least. But yeah, if you've got Breece at this point and you're a playoff team, it doesn't feel good. Because, like, are you really going to sit Breece? Do you have, 2 legit running back options that you're going to play over Breece? Maybe not. It's tricky. It's one of those things where you're just kind of like, man, you just feel like you're screwed. The guy at this point got you there, and now you're in the playoffs, and it's a dilemma. You don't know what to do with him, right?
You're just waiting for the rug to get pulled out from underneath you.
I mean, just sticking with the Jets, this whole offense is just like cratered. And Garrett Wilson, I mean, again, a guy wide open. Rodgers, easy pass, just woefully overthrows it. I mean, that was the ultimate Jet game in a nutshell.
They've been doing that all year long.
I know. That was just, I don't know.
The real question, though, is like, what do you do with a Garrett Wilson, a Breece Hall, Devontae Adams? If they're
I think
starting,
you gotta play
you're
those
starting them.
guys.
So
You
I
just gotta
mean,
play those guys.
yeah, you just gotta play them, and that's the dilemma fantasy wise is you don't feel great about putting any of these guys in your starting lineup. Crazy enough.
I mean, just
would've
stick it
lost
on the
a lot of
Brees
money.
Hall. Just stick it on these running backs. Like, look at Kenneth Walker. Those first 5 games, the guy had 19 points or more in every game. His low was 14.6. He had the one game. He hasn't hit 14.6 in his last 5 games. He had 7 touchdowns in his first 5 games. He has 1. But I mean, what are you going to do? You got to play him.
Yeah, well, you gotta keep throwing them out there. There's just certain players at this point in the season that are hurting you on a weekly basis that are in your starting lineup. There's guys that are helping you. That's just the world we live in right now with fantasy.
Throw Kenny Walker right in there too. I mean, he hasn't been doing great. Probably better than Brees, but not great.
Yeah, that's all right. So that's it. I'll turn it over to you guys.
All right, Nelson.
Well, for me, it's not, again, what I talked with Chris about and what we did on the show on last week. It's a little more of the same. It's not so much, well, it's observations from this past week, because to me, I take it week to week, but it's more about like preparing for the playoffs, right? So if you've got teams that are either in contention, you're trying to win this week, FFPC, you're in the finals. If you're in the finals week, it's about setting your lineup and having, you can still make pickups, okay, in FFPC, but the player pool has dwindled down because they lock every player. So Garendo is probably a guy that was another thing where I was talking to a couple of people, and over at FFPC, Garendo is probably that guy that like was dropped the last 2 weeks. So he's probably locked. So he's not even, unless he's on your roster, he's not going to be this like difference maker type of pickup this week. In NFFC, I want to say he's about 34% available in main events, and maybe just a tad more in the RotoWire online championship. So with him, he's the ultimate pickup. And I also think Parker Washington is the other guy that stuck out to me, that hit my radar. 12 targets. I think it's one of those situations where when you have a receiver getting double-digit targets, I don't care, whatever the dynamic is, you have to take note of it, okay, when he's getting that. And I think with this Jacksonville team, it's probably a situation where you could pick him up. He gives you some depth, and if you're hurting a little bit at your wide receiver 3 or flex, he's a guy that put him in and let's see what happens, because that's what I want out of my wide receivers at this point. I want those guys that are have the potential for double-digit targets.
Parker Washington is going to be that perfect bye week replacement. Now, could he come back and give you a 2 for 12? 100%. But when you're looking at your team going into week 14 and all these receivers and straight down the list, you're losing running backs, receivers, you're just trying to plug in a spot here and there. And you see Parker Washington available on your waiver wire right after Garendo, like you said. He's going to be the guy that people are like, all right, I could get 10, 12 points out of this guy. And we're all desperate for that going into week 14. So yeah, Parker Washington. Now, does it change your outlook on this with Mac Jones most likely starting instead of Trevor Lawrence?
No, not necessarily, because Mac was still peppering him with targets when Lawrence went out. So not really a worry of mine. And if anything, like Parker, he works more of middle of the field than Thomas does, and Mac Jones doesn't have the arm talent that Lawrence does. So I think he's gonna look more to the middle of the field. So I think his skill set plays into the inability of Mac Jones really getting it downfield too much. Okay. So those are like the 2 guys that stick out to me. I mentioned last week Will Levis. I still think like he's a guy. I don't care how ugly it looks. I just want fantasy points, and Levis has that potential because of the schedule. I
No,
like. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So
I was just going to follow up with that.
him, and then like if you've got like Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels teams, and you didn't have like a backup to this point, I think Levis, Derek Carr, and Cooper Rush are kind of like the three scrubby kind of quarterbacks that are readily available in leagues that you can pick up and stream this week and have relatively decent matchups. So that's what I'm looking at for my teams, moving forward and for this week. For defenses, I think the Chargers defense, I like their schedule in the playoffs, and they're available about 10, 11, 12% in some leagues. So I think they're a no-brainer. And then I really like the Cardinals and the Bengals defense. So those are the two defenses in terms of matchups that I like.
Yeah, and on Arizona, they've really stepped up too, especially
Yeah.
on their pass defense. I mean, I would even call them kind of almost Vikings light in how they're confusing opposing quarterbacks with their looks and everything. They're a defense that is, I've been getting more and more interested in picking up, and after watching them against the Vikings, I think, and Seattle as well the previous week, they're definitely one to pick up.
Yeah, I noticed that myself. I went in and I picked up Arizona's defense last week in a whole bunch of leagues that I was taking to the playoffs to try and mix and match heading in. Nelson, what's the reasoning with the Cincinnati defense scheduling? Because they've been looking, like one of the worst defenses in the league.
Yeah, they are. But in terms of matchups and what you have available, I want to play matchups in the fantasy playoffs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If I've got a really good defense that's kind of like been solid all year, I might just roll with them. But if you're looking to play matchups week to week in the fantasy playoffs, they get Tennessee. Will Levis can definitely turn it over. They get Jameis Winston. Last time I checked, he definitely can turn it over. Okay, and you got Denver, which it's Bo Nix. Like he's been solid for a rookie, but he's still a rookie. So like he's plenty capable of turning the ball over. And so when I look at those three matchups, even though it's a scrubby kind of defense, I think the Bengals have potential, to score some points.
Yeah, I got burned this past. Go ahead, Matt.
Just going back, because we're talking about Arizona. If you had the choice between Arizona this week or Tennessee, who would you take? Because, Tennessee's getting Jacksonville. You're getting Mac Jones. They do have a good defense. Their offense has put them in horrible positions. And I know Snead's out, but who would you go with there? This is pretty much a question I'm asking for me.
I'm going Cardinals because Geno Smith is like the type of quarterback. I don't look at Geno Smith as like this guy that is going to take care of the football, not turn it over. Like we've seen, the Seahawks offense, in shambles, in that offensive line, Geno running for his life, getting sacked. So sack fumbles, pick sixes, those are all, on the table when you're facing the Seahawks. So I'm going Cardinals. I think Tennessee had been really, really solid up until a few weeks ago. And I think you're now seeing where you're running and you're passing on this defense. I think they just I think they've lost their edge. So I'm not really interested in Tennessee.
Arizona and Seattle just played a gross 16-6 game in division 2 weeks ago. They get to see each other again. Usually the second time division teams play each other, it's a lower scoring game because they already know each other, from seeing it earlier in the season. Now they just saw each other 2 weeks ago. So I'm hoping the complete opposite happens and there's offense in this game because it can't get much uglier than the first time they met in a 16-6 game. But, like Nelson said with the Tennessee point, their defense is just falling apart. I'd have to roll with Arizona at home. They're a game behind Seattle in the standings. It's a must-win game, and their defense is pretty solid. So it's the same reason why we all picked them up for the fantasy playoffs here. keep an eye on two defenses that are widely available, and they have some good spot starts in the fantasy playoffs. The Vegas Raiders and the Atlanta Falcons. Two defenses that aren't that good, but that Raider defense is starting to improve a little bit. They have Crosby there that they could get sacks, and they're playing hard. So, and they have a couple good games, good matchups going forward there. Nelson, real quick, I just wanted to throw it to you. This is the second week. We talked about Will Levis last week, talking about him again this week. I see what you're saying with Levis, and I picked him up on your recommendation on a couple of teams I'm taking into the playoffs to be my backup. This week, would you go with Levis over Kirk Cousins, Caleb Williams, Sam Darnold, and Geno Smith? Out of those four guys, how are you ranking them?
Darnold sticks out to me for some reason, and I
starter or sit
as a start.
Okay,
I like him over all those guys.
Okay.
This week, so he sticks out to me. Let me see, who do they? Atlanta. Okay, so Cousins, man, I can't start him, man. I expect the Vikings to put up points on Atlanta. And that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
And it's more of a pass funnel with the Vikings. So it sets up perfect for Cousins on paper, but he hasn't looked good, man. So I can't go with him. So it's Darnold, Levis. I really like. Okay, and who is Caleb?
Caleb,
you had mentioned. He's probably
the Caleb
third.
season is just unbelievable. The Caleb Williams season is an all timer.
Listen, he got it done against Detroit.
Yep.
It's San Fran. I think he can get it done, but Levis and Caleb might be close, but you probably lean Caleb, right? You feel more confident with him?
I think so. I think the San Francisco defense we can't view as the San Francisco defense anymore. It's falling apart.
Yeah,
Buffalo
Fred
up
Warner's got
field.
the ankle. Bosa hasn't been playing.
Bosa won't play again. I don't think you see Bosa again this year with that oblique issue. Caleb's getting it.
He's got more upside for sure, but
Mm-hmm.
You can see it now. It's been 4 weeks in a row. Levis putting up 20 plus points, fantasy wise.
Mm-hmm.
For a free agent pickup, that you've been streaming, you can't really ask for much more,
Yeah.
The upside is probably a little bit limited because we haven't seen that spike we got of him, but at home against, Jacksonville, it's possible he could hit, Westbrook Akina is funny. That's another guy that I just shake my head because I'm looking for Ridley. You guys know I have a ton of Ridley, right? And I'm like, oh, is that Ridley? Nope. It's Westbrook Akina scoring another touchdown.
He's sitting on a couple of my benches for the last couple of weeks out of desperation as my wide receiver 7. And every week I look down and there's 18 points, 20 points. At some point, we just got to stick him in and just say, hey, listen, go until the wheels fall off here because this guy is just 15, 20 points every week with the touchdowns. Maybe it's, what do they say? Twice as a trend or something like that. This is 6 weeks in a row now. We're just sitting here getting burned by this guy, either sitting on the wire
Chris,
or on our benches.
As soon as you put him in your lineup, that's when it's coming.
Of course.
Of course. It's going to be that, 3.5 point game.
Sure.
I'll use a baseball term. His home run to fly ball percentage is insane. You look at the touchdowns versus catches. It's wild. On our text thread, we call him IKEA. Shout out to my boy Booms for that. IKEA. Weekly touchdown every Sunday. Weekly touchdown for IKEA. It really is amazing.
The best stat I saw this week was he's got 25 catches on the season and 9 touchdowns or 8 or 9 touchdowns. Trey McBride's got 80 something catches and 0 touchdowns. It's
Josh
so
Allen
good.
has more receiving touchdowns than Trey McBride. That is the most wild stat ever.
By the way, can we just touch on that real quick? I don't know if you guys. I was following a league of mine with that. The guy had a Josh Allen and Amari Cooper combination, and I needed to beat the guy. and everything was going perfect in the storm. Cooper was doing nothing. Allen was having a bad game. And then that play happened. And I didn't know. They originally credited it that as Allen 2 touchdowns on one play and Cooper a touchdown.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't believe I just lost with a 3 touchdown combination. That's like probably never happened ever. Absolutely amazing. They wind up reversing it and taking the touchdown away from Cooper. But Josh Allen, imagine how good you're living if you're a Josh Allen owner with sitting at like 8 or 9 fantasy, because you got to remember, as a Josh Allen owner,
I was really
Matt, Josh Allen owners had no points basically. The first 2 touchdowns were ran in by the running back. They were up 14-3, 17-3. It was almost halftime. The guy had like 8 points, and the snow was falling harder. It was going to be the Josh Allen 10-12 fantasy game that screwed everybody. And after that play and the run-in, he winds up getting 34 fantasy points and being like QB1 on the week.
And what was amazing was that
Winston
pass to Mac Hollins that he threw, that that high dart. That was a hell of a play. So, yes, we got very lucky with Josh Allen.
Very lucky with Josh Allen.
So those were basically the things that stuck out to me. Was, basically like defenses that I like moving forward, the 2 big pickups, the quarterbacks, backing them up. I touched base on that, where I just think that like the backup quarterback it's like a handcuff, where if you have like, I'll give you an example on teams where I'm fighting for tooth and nail for every playoff spot. I don't have any teams where I feel comfortable at this point making the playoffs. But if I have Kirk Cousins as a backup, and let's say I have Josh Allen as my top QB or Jalen Hurts, I'm just dropping Cousins and picking up their backup. Like I said, Trubisky. Yep. And the reason why is because who's to say week 16 they're not starting Penix, for Atlanta. There's so many of these type of scenarios that could happen. And then, again, God forbid, like something happens with Allen. He's missed time at the end of the season before. Jalen Hurts a couple of years ago, if you guys remember, he was really good and then, got hurt and missed time. And I don't want a guy like Cousins. There's no guarantee that guy's going to be the starter, come, 2-3 weeks from now. So I can almost guarantee it, unless there's like a freak incident at practice. Trubisky is going to be the guy that comes in for Allen if Allen needs to miss a week or something.
Yeah, and he runs and he's in charge of a good offense. So, yeah, all great points, Nelson. I'm also doing this at the tight end position, guys. This is another little thing going into the fantasy playoffs. You might say, well, how are you doing this at the tight end position? Well, we have a lot of tight ends. I have a Brock Bowers, Dalton Schultz team. Okay, I'm getting rid of Dalton Schultz, and for $1, give me Michael Mayer. And now I have Bowers and Mayer going into the playoffs. I hope, no point in bringing in Dalton Schultz into the playoffs with me. I'm riding Bowers. If something goes wrong, give me Michael Mayer. I'm doing the same thing with my Trey McBride teams. Okay, give me the kid Wiggins. Okay, Higgins. I'm sorry. Give me him. So. We have a lot of tight ends on week 14 bye. That was another reason to bring up my issue, my question at the top of the show. Mark Andrews is on a bye. Dalton Schultz is on a bye. Your Zach Ertz teams, Zach Ertz is a top 12 tight end. Him and Hunter Henry, you're losing these guys. You have to replace them going into the playoffs. You got to come up with some type of plan here.
Goddard's hurt.
So Goddard's hurt. Taysom Hill, we just lost.
Yeah.
So the tight end position is I had a ton of Taysom Hill, and those teams, a lot of them are going into the playoffs. Now I have to drop Taysom Hill, pick up a tight end, and replace my starter for the week. So there's a lot of mixing and matching here at the tight end position. So if you have those studs in Trey McBride and Brock Bowers, you might as well just go get their backups for $1. Take that into the playoffs and work with that tight end room for the next 3 weeks.
I think that definitely works, Chris, and I've done that in the past. But I think that's out of it. It only works with certain situations where, like Michael Mayer, I think actually is a talented tight end, and I think if Bowers missed that, like Mayer would definitely be involved. But I don't think I think they would stop the whole funneling targets to the tight end the way they do Bowers. So no one's expecting, Bowers production if Mayer comes in. So the only point I'm making is like it's unique to who the backup is. I think Higgins has talent behind McBride. But again, is he going to get 15 targets like McBride does? No,
No.
it's unique to those freak athletes, right? Those elite tight ends. But it could get you through. At least you're not taking a total. You might even take a 0. So I shouldn't say that. What it does is it gives you the potential to not take a 0. Whereas like a Dalton Schultz, whatever, like there's just no guarantee. Like a guy like that is even, going to be standing upright, 2 weeks from now. I agree with you that like grabbing the backup is like almost guaranteeing you a guy that you can start if the starter went down.
Nelson, I think basically my point there was, and yeah, you cleared it up nicely, but like I have 2 teams that are Trey McBride and Taysom Hill, right? And I was flexing Taysom Hill at the flex spot with McBride, and now I have to drop Taysom Hill, and I'm not going to take just a Trey McBride empty into the playoffs.
No, not at all.
And then I look at the wire, and the wire is complete trash, right? At the tight end position, there's nothing there. Well, you might as well go take the Kid Wiggins in, So things like that.
I agree with you. I mean, that's the thing. The high stakes leagues that we're in, where this is the final week, there's no more, pickups that you can make. You have to look at your team, your roster, and say, all right, I'm holding these like handcuff running backs. What am I doing with Tank Bigsby and guys like that? You just go ahead and drop them if it makes sense for your team to set up your team for the playoffs at the end of the day. For you to sit there and like, I'm going to hold Bigsby because if ETN goes down, Bigsby could go into my lineup. Well, Dearness Johnson's probably going to be involved and everything. So like there's still question marks even with that. So if you've got your legit starters and your flex, locked in, you just kind of have to go with that and then set up the rest of your roster where it makes sense and you're not taking zeros anywhere.
Yeah. Yep.
No doubt. All right, Matt.
For me, the big observation going into this week is Thursday night football. Tremendous game, Green Bay at Detroit. But with all these 6 buys, and like I got a lot of Zay Flowers, Downs, everybody's got Terry McLaurin. These are some big names that are out. This game is going to be really crucial to kicking off, this massive week. You got Jaden Reed, who put up 19 points on Thanksgiving, but he really hasn't had the volume in the passing game of it. He did get 6 targets, but he's basically getting touchdowns is what's saving, which is great. You want touchdowns. But a guy like Christian Watson, like with all these guys on buys, you got Devonta Smith, who we don't know if he's going to play this week. Probably, I'm assuming, because they held him out for the extra week. But that's Sunday at 1:00. Guys that we were high on, Jameson Williams. He's another guy you're going to have to play and, hope for big things. Hopefully keeps his head on straight. I think the guy has such immense talent, but he seems to make a bonehead play every game. So just looking at that game and, having to start maybe a Christian Watson, which is the ultimate, ride or die, boomer bust kind of thing. And like even Jaden Reed, who I love, you gotta hope he's scoring touchdowns and stuff. And I'm J-Mo's going to be big for me this week. I gotta play him in a couple of key spots. course of all these, buys. So what are you guys thinking about the Packers or JMO situations?
Yeah, I think one of the things you definitely need to worry about is, a lot of times by the time we get to Thursday, there's a lot of guys who aren't practicing or just limited, and we don't know what's going to be happening with them. And, if you pass on Thursday players, assuming that these guys are going to make it into your lineup at the end of the week, you could get caught getting hurt there pretty badly. So I'm always, if I'm worried at all about, the rest of my roster, I'm just going to go ahead and fire those Thursday guys off no matter what, especially in a big bye week like this, because the odds of me being able to get help on Saturday night on the waiver wire are pretty minimal. So I don't want to leave myself in that position.
And that's a solid point, Dan, because I know right off the bat in a big spot, I have Jamison Williams and Devonta Smith fighting for my wide receiver 3 spot. And unless we get definitive news on Devonta Smith, now, Matt, you just brought up Devonta Smith. That's something I wanted to talk about real quick. I would be giddy if I had A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith heading into the fantasy playoffs now with this Dallas Goedert injury that looks like it's going to shelf him to go on IR. This team has absolutely nothing out on offense. When Goddard is out of this offense, they don't have a third receiver. Nelson, our boy Dotson, just couldn't step up for us these last couple of weeks. Piece of trash. Yeah. They have nothing. So my point is this: if Devonta Smith could come back healthy, and you look at that Eagles fantasy playoff schedule, and you have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith on your playoff team, these guys are going to eat. No one else is going to touch the ball besides the two of them and Barkley every play, and that's something exciting. So I don't want to get stuck in a position where I have to start Jamison Williams on Thursday because Devonta is iffy on Sunday. And, that's just a one-off situation. You can use that for anybody that's iffy going into Sunday. And we had a lot of injuries this past week that are going to really make this Sunday even more complicated than it already is with 6 teams on a bye. But you don't want to jump the gun and start, somebody on Thursday night in a crucial week like this and then get to Sunday and they're out and you just blew your week 14 and chance at a playoff win, a playoff spot, or a league title or whatever. So very tricky situation. Mm-hmm. I will say this. I'm sorry. The one of the last point I wanted to make on that is Romeo Doubs and what his status is going to be for Thursday night, because I think that can affect the whole Packers wide receiver situation. If Doubs sits again with that concussion, he's not ready to go. I'd feel a lot better starting Christian Watson, to your point, Matt, and even a guy like Tucker Kraft at the tight end position, who had a really solid game last Thanksgiving.
Okay, and my next observation is I believe it's Tashawn Samuel, formerly known as Debo Samuel. I mean, he lost those rights. I was so high on Debo coming into this year. Ayuk done for the year, and I don't know what I'm watching there. Forget Sunday night, the snow and everything, but just the past couple of weeks, he just looks like he can't get open at all. I started Adonai Mitchell over him. He got a 0, and Samuel got 5 points. But I thought it was the right play. And if Mitchell catches that pass late in that game, it's probably like a 40, 50-yard touchdown. So, just the Debo Samuel thing to me has been wild watching it this year and just how wrong I was on a guy I truly loved.
Complete bust. No doubt about it, Matt. Something's not right there. I don't know if he just checked out. He knows he's not going to be in San Francisco after this year, and he's just mailing it in here. I know he had, what did he do? He gained a lot of muscle in this offseason. Maybe that's slowing him down. He wanted to change his body type coming into the year. I don't know, but the whole season's been a wash for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think pretty much everything else is covered. You guys, tight ends, defenses, kickers, backup quarterbacks. I think we did a good job on that. So, I'll pass it over, to Dan.
Yeah, I don't have too much. You guys hit most of the highlights. I think, my main thing is this is the time of year where you got to stop trying to make fetch happen. With the quarterbacks, it's just not happening with For sure, it's not happening with Kirk Cousins. It's not happening really with C.J. Stroud. The guys like that, you just can't keep putting in your lineup optimistically and expecting good things to happen. They're just not happening. You got to move on. Try to figure out something good that's going to happen elsewhere, and then you can lean into certain defenses too. I mean, like we're definitely seeing which defenses, are giving us the fantasy carnival potential. The Bengals, the Bucks, and so you want to try to set up your lineups going through the playoffs so you can get as many players in against those guys against those defenses as possible. I mean, when you have Adam Thielen and he can look like a world beater. That's a defense.
That was a touchdown, by the way.
Yes, it was.
I don't understand how that wasn't.
But that's the thing, But if you try to turn around and use Adam Thielen again this week against Philadelphia, you're going to get a rude wake-up call. So, the defenses really matter. I don't worry about it with the great players, but with the more marginal players. You have to be looking at those defensive matchups, and and not only what were they doing earlier in the year, but what have they been doing recently? One of my favorite things to use is a schedule adjusted defenses against like particular positions, wide receivers, tight ends, whatever, because you can see what's been happening recently, and it also kind of takes out if they've been playing a lot of elite tight ends, you don't have to this will take that out of the equation so that, sometimes defenses look terrible against a tight end because they played a lot of elite ones. Other times defenses are just terrible against tight ends. So knowing the difference between them really makes a difference. And then only other thought, keep grinding on the waiver wire, even if your budget is tight. I've got some teams that have like $3, $5, whatever. But at this time of year, so many teams have quit participating in the waiver wire. So many teams are also out of money. You can get players at $1 that you would never have ever guessed you could get for $1. You might not get to Garendo for $1, but you could probably get some kind of useful player. You might be able to get Jaleel McLaughlin for $1 if you're short at running back. So just keep grinding that waiver wire no matter what.
Jaleel McLaughlin last night. Where did he get 15 carries for 86 yards to answer the question of which running back do you want, Javonte Williams or Audric Estime? The answer was neither. It's maybe Jaleel McLaughlin.
What's wild with Jaleel is I figured that guy would be catching a lot of passes. You figured he'd be like a Darren Sproles guy.
Yeah,
he doesn't even catch passes.
It's a weird.
I don't know what the hell is going on with that.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, let's a couple things I want to get to before we get out of here. Looking ahead to 2025, I mean, this is a time of year where, while we're also focused on, making the playoffs and getting our teams ready, we're also kind of looking back on the regular season and what's happened. How do we see teams trending, things like that. I'm curious to get an offense that mostly misfired in 2024 that you might see yourself bankrolling in 2025 in drafts. Nelson, why don't you get us started here?
Oh, shit. I wasn't even ready for this. So,
you want Matt to go?
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Nelson's taking the pass. He's
passing. I figured Nelson was going to go with the Texans, so I had another team, but I'll go with the Texans. CJ Stroud is probably, to me, the most disappointing fantasy player. I thought, the floor was going to be at least stable and the upside was tremendous. And, I don't know. Tank Dell, maybe after a year of, I don't know what the hell's going on. Somebody tweeted out a thing on a deep pass where CJ Stroud hit it 100% of the time last year. And he had the guy about like 5 steps, and by the time he got the ball there, it got knocked away. I don't know what happened to C.J. Stroud. It's, I haven't really played him. I played him this week over Drake May, and it really didn't hurt me. It was like a 4-point difference in like FFPC, so it wasn't a major thing. But just totally this whole offense. I gotta hope, Joe Mixon isn't going to be as great as he was this year, next year. And you got Nico and you got Tank. And I think the kid Stover will eventually evolve into their tight end because him and CJ were really tight in college. So I'm going to go with that offense. I mean, I just had such high hopes for it this year. And, I'll go back into that one.
Yeah. That's a good one, Matt.
All right. Sounds good. I'll fire out Carolina. I think Bryce Young looks like a completely different quarterback since regaining the starting job. I see a quarterback that's moving with confidence and using his legs to avoid the pressure and extending his plays. It's so night and day from basically what we saw from all of his starts beforehand. He's got a big test coming up this week with Philadelphia, but I think overall, going into next year, he looks like a quarterback that, I thought early in the year, man, Carolina's going to have to go back to the drawing board at quarterback. Now, I don't think so. I think Bryce Young is probably the guy. They got to give him at least another year, and I think he's going to take advantage of it. You guys think I'm crazy on that, or no?
I don't. It's amazing, though. He must have grew like, a foot. Because remember how short he was? You couldn't see over defense. But the thing I've noticed in the last couple of weeks watching him play is the confidence. He definitely has a confidence and a swagger. And even when they were down in that game to the Bucs, he brought them down. They got the touchdown. So, I mean, look, it's a tough matchup this week. But if they can get themselves another really good receiver into that offense, Jonathan Brooks next year with Chuba, you got a two-headed monster, possibly like Detroit. I mean, I could definitely see good things there.
Yeah, I like that one too, Dan. Mine would be, it's 50-50 for me. I like, but I'll stick with the Bears. I could see myself going back in the Bears, especially if they finish strong here. They bring in some new, the new coaching staff that's going to come in, as long as they pick the right guys here and give Caleb some good, coaches to work with here. He's starting to look a lot better. Got to assume second year Rome Odunze will take a step up and be a legit number 2 to DJ Moore in this offense. The offensive line will be healthier. What they'll add in a draft. Swift and Roschon in the backfield. So overall, it was a disaster for the last couple months. It's starting to get better. If they make some improvements, I can see it now. I'm going to be a sucker for Caleb. There's just certain players that I just keep going back to the well until I'm stubborn. And I'm going to be right on this guy. I'm going to be right on this guy, AKA Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I'm about to say Jerry Jeudy.
Certain guys like that. So I could see myself going back in on the Bears offense all the way around. And I'll cheat and throw a second offense out there that I know I'll like already going into next year, and that's the Colts.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, on the Bears, real quick, Chris, I agree with you. I think last year they had the opportunity. From what I've read and heard, it could all be rumors. That was the job that Ben Johnson wanted. I mean, rightfully so. You got the 1-1, and they kept Eberflus, which was a total disaster, as we've seen. So, I mean, if they get him there, just with his creativity, I think that's a smash spot,
Yeah.
So
we didn't even talk about that complete mess of Thanksgiving. I never saw anything like that in my life. I never will. I'm watching the clock go down. The completion was like at 33 seconds, and I'm watching the clock just tick down, and I'm like, they must have called a timeout, and then the clock operator's just letting the clock run. But then I see them all scrambling around. I'm like, why is Caleb calling out plays at the line, and the clock is just under 15? I'm like, what are they doing? And to watch it unfold like that on national television on Thanksgiving is absolute the worst thing I've ever saw in a clock management situation. And it hurt me even more because I had the over 47 in that game, and they were going to kick a game-tying field goal easily. And as long as they kick that, it's an automatic win. and Eberflus deserved to not even get on the bus after that game.
Especially with him doubling down after the game and saying, "Yep, we handled it the right way."
Yeah, we nailed it. Yeah, we executed it perfectly.
Yeah, because there's only two ways, and I disagree with people on Twitter. I think they maybe have an axe to grind. They don't like Caleb. I wasn't a huge fan of Caleb. I liked Drake May more coming out of the draft, but Caleb is a talented dude. I think he just needs to be surrounded by good coaching, and I've told you guys this since week 1 of the show, right? I told you I was not a fan of this coaching staff. Offensive coordinator, head coach, they both been fired. There was only 2 ways to handle that. Completion, immediate timeout, knowing that whatever you do on the next play on 3rd down, you're going to rush the kicking team out there for a field goal. If you complete a pass, whatever, over the middle, stays in bounds, you have enough time to get the special teams out there and kick a field goal. Or you hurry up to the line, you call a play, and you run whatever the F you want to run. I don't care if it's a quarterback draw. I don't care if it's a handoff. I don't care if it's a little 3-yard out, okay? And then you immediately call that timeout. But once things were going south, okay, and you could tell that something was going on where Caleb's changing things at the line, once it gets to 10 seconds, as a coach in high school, peewee, college, and freaking NFL, this shit, that drove me nuts. I was yelling at the TV screen, watching this game. My family's upstairs. It's Thanksgiving. They're like, what the fuck is wrong with Nelson right now?
Maddening.
My wife's like, he's watching football. This is this is normal in our household.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm screaming, call the time out. Nothing good is going to come from this. Once it hits 10 seconds, you're not going to get the playoff. Like, whatever you're going to do is it shambles at this point. As a head coach, you got to take control and say, timeout, guys, just let's kick the field goal.
Nelson, because even if you've effed up the situation as bad as they did and it got to 10 seconds and you call the timeout there, at least you go set up for the field goal, you tie it, you go to overtime. If you want to run another play, if you've driven the clock down, snap the ball, throw it out of bounds if nothing is there. That's
waste
fine.
A few seconds.
Waste a few seconds, 100%. It deprived us. The game was going so well that 4th quarter with so many fantasy points. It hurt so bad, and those are the little things. They could have took away 15, 20 extra fantasy points from our players, getting that game to overtime, which is what we're really mad at in the whole situation here. We don't give a shit if the Bears lose or F the situation up. But with all the talent that's going on,
I'm a Vikings fan. I do care.
Oh, well.
I want to see the Bears win.
Dan, you're any of those situations, we got talent all over the field. Every play is fantasy points for us. You know, you got Amon-Ra, Jameson, Goff, Caleb, you know, on and on. Dunze, Allen, DJ Moore. Everybody's got points going. You get that game to overtime, that's another 10 minutes of fantasy to play, and to get it taken away from us kind of made the turkey taste like shit.
Listen, 100%. We're all rooting for overtime. We love it. Extra time, more fantasy points, especially if we've got a bunch of players in that game. But also, to me, bad coaching drives me nuts. Like, just because I'm a fan of football in general. So just watching that game and watching how they mess that up, like that just drives me nuts. Man.
Yeah, but that goes back to what we said. Like, that goes back to the GM, the ownership. You had the 1-1. You had a chance to reset everything. If you're ownership, you have a chance to reset everything. Get a bright mind like Ben Johnson in there with a phenom rookie quarterback and all that. And you're going to draft another receiver most likely, if possible. You sign Keenan Allen, you trade for Keenan Allen. You got more. It was just, like you said, I mean, Waldron, nobody liked Waldron. JSN's comment in the offseason was one of the most telling things ever. He's like, are we on camera?
Yeah.
And to keep Eberflus, because he was boys with the GM. And if I'm ownership, I'm getting rid of the GM.
GM too, yeah.
He's got to go.
100%.
You guys say that, but he did ace he made all the right moves. These, with the trade with Carolina, he changed the whole look of the
I think the trade with Carolina.
Coaching thing, he screwed. The coaching thing, he's completely screwed up.
Here's
No
the-
doubt about
Chase
it.
Here's the
Claypool for a
problem to
second.
Matt's
Yeah.
point. To Matt's
Well-
point with the coaching. So me watching that press conference, because I was on Twitter, I was so furious. I haven't really been tweeting much, but that got me going. So like I had to I fired off a couple of tweets about like how poor that coaching was. That what a debacle. But to me, the press conference, for him to double down and say, "Yep, you know, we handled everything correctly," I'm just like, what a pompous a-hole. Like this guy like literally does not get it. So that makes me wonder, you're around that guy in the building every single day. How did you not figure that out, that this guy is not the right guy moving forward? We got Caleb, we got Keenan Allen, we drafted a Dunze, we got DJ Moore, we got Swift, we loaded up. We surrounded Caleb with the pieces for this to be a good, team moving forward. How do you not figure out, like, let's get a fresh start because this guy ain't it? Like, how do you? That's the thing that, like, is
At least they
perplexing.
shamed him. They made him do the press conference on Monday and then fired him.
Yeah, that was great. But now to end it, guys, I do have my guy. So Dan caught me off guard, but I have my team, and it's actually two of them. Okay, so I've got two disappointing teams this year that I'm gonna be in on next year if they make these moves. Okay, because again, it free agency, the draft, things like that, it factors in. New York Giants, you're going to go draft Cam Ward, and you're going to have Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy next year. I'm in on that offense. I'm going to be interested in those players, okay? I think the Giants can make a comeback.
You can get your offensive line back healthy, too. Go ahead.
100%. But it all starts with the quarterback. You got to go get the quarterback in the draft. Sanders, Cam Ward, one of those guys. I'm a fan of Cam Ward. And then the next team is the Patriots. You're going to go draft Travis Hunter, and you're gonna sign T. Higgins or a receiver like that, and I'm all in. Give me Drake May with some wide receiver talent, and I'm going to be interested in that offense. So those are the two that are bottom of the barrel right now that I'm interested. I'd be interested in, depending on the moves they make.
I don't think there's anything more short in life than T. Higgins going to the Patriots in the offseason. I
the
really
only
think
thing
that's
is-
going to happen. Yep.
Can he stay healthy? I mean, because he's so frustrated. I was want to add one more. The Jets. Aaron Rodgers goes. They get a good quarterback. I mean, with healthy Brees, you even got Braylon there too. The wide receiver situation. I do think, getting Rodgers out of there, they have to. He's been like a cancer to that team ever since he got on there. From the moment he went down on play 4 in his first year, it's just been bad juju. And I will go in on the Jets if they get a good young quarterback and can make those moves and get a good head coach. Okay. But it's the Jets, so.
Yeah. Well, I got to hand it, just to wrap this up, I got to hand it to Eberflus, on a day when there was probably more turkey eaten anywhere. He was the most overdone turkey in the entire nation. So there you go.
No doubt.
All right, let's move on to we got the Super Bye week coming up. So we all know the obvious players, right? I'm not interested in the obvious players. Let's talk about some non-obvious players you feel good about starting this week. Doesn't matter what position, just give me one non-obvious player that you're going to be putting in your starting lineup and you feel really good about. Matt, go for it.
I mean, I was going to go Levis, but we talked enough about him. I'll throw MVS in. He's basically the NFC version of Westbrook Akine. So they're playing the Giants. I got to assume he's going to get a couple of deep balls. A chance he catches one of them for a touchdown at least. So that'd be my guy, MVS.
Love it.
Nelson, you want to hit it?
I'm gonna stay with the Saints. I'm gonna say Juwan Johnson.
Oh, you just took mine. You just took mine. That's funny. Go ahead.
I think moving forward, he's locked into a prominent role in that offense, and I think he'll tight end position, we just lost Taysom, and I think he's like an obvious fit if you didn't really have like a good backup option.
Yeah, that was mine. Surprisingly,
all right, sorry.
Surprised you pulled. Surprised you pulled.
You want
that
me to
one.
go and give you a minute to come up with another? Or are you just gonna say
no,
that
go
was
ahead.
mine? All right.
No, Dan, I'm always ready. I'm always ready, Dan. You want me to fire up? You ain't gonna stump. You're not gonna stump me with that shit, Dan. Adam Thielen.
I tried to give you the graceful out, but
I appreciate that.
So,
Adam Thielen.
I'll go,
I think. Okay.
I'll go Cooper Rush versus Cincinnati. I think the Bengals offense is going to score. They're going to force Dallas to the air to keep up, and the Cincinnati defense, as we talked about earlier, they're a fantasy carnival maker. So I think Rush is like one of those lower range quarterbacks that you can count on this week if you are hurting in the bye.
Real quick, I'll steal one from the thread last night from my boy Booms. The Bengals in their 3-game losing streak have scored 99 points. They've let up 111. That's
right.
bad. So.
I mean, listen, we've been saying it for a while now. The Bengals offense is going to make people a lot of money here down the stretch. If they stay off, they all stay on the field. Burrow, Brown, Higgins, and Chase. That's who you want.
Yep.
You want these 38, 35 games, and that's what they're providing right now. So, yeah, I'm excited for that Monday night game too. We'll see if Dallas's offense can keep up with them. I'll throw out. I just threw out Adam Thielen. I know he's got the tough matchup in Philly, but they should be trailing. And Thielen always, every year, it just seems we give up on him. We leave him for dead, the old man. And then he just becomes this PPR machine, this 7 for 90 and a touchdown type wide receiver. I was laughing at people that put him in their lineup this past week, and I had egg on my face because he dropped 20-something fantasy points. That I'm still sticking with my guy Rico Dowdle. I think he has got a real opportunity here with his schedule going forward. He's one of these. I don't want to call him Chase Brown, but he's one of these guys that's getting 85-90% of the backfield here. And right now, down the stretch, that's what we want. Just give us somebody that'll volume you to death. And Rico could do it, and he catching balls out of the backfield. I'll stick with him. So, and Keenan Allen is another one. I don't know if that's too, obvious at this point after the last 2 or 3 weeks that he's had, but he's comfortably in my lineups now with this Bears offense.
You gave us Thielen, so I'll let you take Keenan Allen as well. And shout out to Nelson too. In his Discord, somebody asked him a question. I forget who the other players were, but Thielen was one of them, and Nelson was very unequivocal about putting Thielen into the lineup. And that was an eyebrow raiser to me. I was like, oh, I don't know if I started thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, it definitely makes sense, but it wasn't one of those plays that was immediately obvious to me. So,
Dan, a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while.
Well, sticking with the Panthers, just because you mentioned Thielen, is there any interest in David Moore, who has 19 targets in the last 2 weeks, a 10 and a 9? We got to assume they're going to be playing from behind.
I mean, got to be some.
Yeah, sure, Matt. Just because things have broken perfectly in this Panthers offense for David Moore and Thielen to shine. Jatavion Sanders missed the game this past week. Coker's been out now for a couple of weeks. They're one of these teams that their targets are drying up. So that's why I would go back to Thielen over and over again here. They're running out of options, and he's got to get fed, especially with how good Bryce.
Matt, have you seen my Fab article?
Looking.
I haven't looked at it yet. I did pull it up. I have yours and Vlad's pulled up, but I haven't read it yet this morning.
So
we gotta read it.
My blurb on David Moore. I don't know why a 29-year-old journeyman wide receiver has 19 targets in the last on a rebuilding team, but here we are.
Yeah, nice. I mean, what the shame of it all is Jalen Coker was looking good, and then he got that shoulder injury, so he wasn't even the same before he missed the last game or two. But I was excited to see what Coker could do, but I don't think he's going to play again.
Speaking of the Panthers offense, we saw Chuba struggle this past week. And Jonathan Brooks finally got some more looks, more touches. And watching that game, the touches that he did get, he looked really good.
Yes, he did.
do we have any hope for all of us that are holding the Jonathan Brooks bags after 14 weeks here, that maybe we could see a scenario where we can unleash him in weeks 14, 15, maybe even 16 as a flex spot? Maybe he's a name that nobody's talking about yet, and we've held him this long. Do they maybe shut down Chuba, or maybe say, listen, last 2, 3, 4 weeks of the season, let's make Brooks our lead back. We know what we have in Chuba. You're paid. You're good to go. You're going to be around here, but we're going to give the kids some run here.
I mean, I don't know if they're shutting Chuba down, but
not shutting. I spoke out of turn with the shutting him down.
I think they definitely want to see over this next month or so what they have in what they have in this kid. This was a kid that they invested in, they waited all year for. And this is a team that's trying to build momentum and get their offense, like we've been talking about,
But so to a usable piece, Matt. But to a usable piece,
I don't know if he's a usable piece, but he may become a flex piece in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
I think they got Tampa Bay again, right, on their schedule. I don't know the rest of their games after Philadelphia, but I mean, he might have some nice matchups where in a flex,
I need to see another week of that though, of Brooks getting production. I'm not one of those guys where I got to see it to believe it. I can start a guy, no problem without seeing it first. But man, fantasy playoffs, I'm just going to fire up Brooks. I'm not ready for that.
Yeah, so the scenario I'm hoping for.
We got to see a game with the volume, really.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm calling it now because I'm hoping that in week 14 here, that maybe we get a 50-50 split. And all of a sudden, Brooks now, where we don't see it yet, in week 14, it starts to become a 50-50 split. Or maybe Brooks gets more time than Chuba. And then you head into the fantasy playoffs, and it's like, whoa, now we have a usable piece here in Brooks for the fantasy playoffs. There's no point in, look at the Giants are doing with Tyrone Tracy. At least they were smart enough to go right back to him, give him the backfield again, even though we fumbled 2 weeks in a row. You're not getting at it. What's the point of playing Singletary? Give it to the young kid these last 5 weeks and go from there.
But he's fumbling, Chris. You can't. It's so retarded. But no, but the Jonathan Brooks thing is more of like that week 16, week 17. If we start seeing it this week, he gets more involved. And then say week 15, he has a really good week. So, I mean, I would say, he's on your bench and you never know. Isaac Orendo,
Yep. Mm-hmm. All right, guys. We've been at it for a little over an hour and a half. So let's let everybody get out of here. But we appreciate everyone tuning in. Check us out next Tuesday, 11 o'clock Eastern. If you haven't done it so far, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Player Profiler channel. And I believe that Kirk in the chat was guaranteeing playoff wins to anybody who hit the like button. So we recommend that you do that. And
I might do it myself.
Hey, if you don't do it and you lose in the playoffs, that's on you. Okay, that's not on us. So if you want the chance, I'd go ahead and hit that like button. And if you're listening to the podcast, give the show a like there as well. Good luck to everybody this week as the fantasy regular season ends, and let's go get some money.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.